It's a Pet NES Punk
Movie.
review!
Watchmen, directed by Zack Snyder and released by Warner Brothers. Before I begin the review, I have to let you know that I'm a pretty big fan of the graphic novel, so you have to remember that as I go through this. Watchmen was a groundbreaking masterpiece from Alan Moore, since it really was the first mainstream comic to treat its superheroes as real, three-dimensional people, all the while telling a fantastic story with great themes and twists and turns along the way. At the same time, it also deconstructed many of the rules and ideas presented in the 50-year history of superhero comics up to that point. To quickly summarize the plot, which you probably know, it's an alternate 1985, where Nixon is still president and where costume heroes used to exist since the 1930s, but have now been outlawed. When one of the old heroes is murdered, a current outlawed hero, Rorschach, sets out to investigate. It's a story of suspense, mystery, character study, and drama all in one. Now, does the movie stand out in the same way the comic did? Yes and no. On the positive side, the film has amazing visuals, often using the comic panels as a direct guide to the shots. Director Zack Snyder took some risks in keeping most of the material from the comic, and I'm sure most audiences did not expect to see most of what they did here. The movie is about 80 to 85% faithful to the comic story, but even the smaller differences weaken the plot, and the characterizations become less rich because of that. The acting ranges from average to excellent. Jackie Earle Haley is a shining star of the film, as Walter Kovacs, aka Rorschach. The barely caged ferocity that Haley conveys is palpable, and his quiet intensity is almost frightening to watch. Billy Crudup is the other standout, as the cold, distant, but all-powerful Dr. Manhattan. Crudup's delivery is human but also robotic at the same time, and the subtle emotions Crudup conveys is just about perfect to the character in the comic. Jeffrey Dean Morgan as Eddie Blake, the comedian, does a good job as well, and he makes you almost feel pity in spite of the vicious and sick things he does in the story. Patrick Wilson as Dan Drayberg, Night Owl, also is pretty good, although he acted a little less depressed than the character in the comic. The two weak acting links, however, are Malin Ackerman as Laurie Juspacek, aka Silk Spectre, and Matthew Good as Adrian Veidt, aka Ozymandias. Ackerman does an okay job, as does Good, but compared to the others, their performances feel flat, and at times they came across as almost disconnected from the other actors they were performing next to. However, this may partially be due to the biggest issue, or what they did change from the comic. Now, I'm going to stay away from the controversial ending change, except I will say that the new ending still works, but not as well as the comic's ending did. That said, there are many small character traits and moments that were either changed or cut out of the story entirely. Laurie smoking, Rorschach being left-handed, John telling Adrian that nothing ever ends, Adrian being unsure he did the right thing, the prison psychiatrist's home life, not seeing the news vendor, Rorschach confronting his landlord. The list goes on and on until my geek head explodes. Fortunately, the director's cut should add some of this material back in, but it won't add all of it. What the director's cut definitely won't change, however, is that in the film, there are now cool sequences. The intruder fight, the tenement fire rescue, Rorschach's arrest, the prison fight, and the final fight of the film all were scenes that were changed from the comic to be bigger and more badass here for the movie. The problem is that these buffed up scenes go against the original tone and spirit of the comic, as Watchmen was never supposed to be cool to begin with. So in closing, is Watchmen an excellent film? Is it a bad film? Absolutely not. It's an enjoyable film that has some good parts, pretty good acting, but also some elements that will make you scratch your head and wonder why they kept most of the comic story intact, but at the same time changed the things that they did. So even if you have not read the comic, it's definitely a film worth seeing, as it's unlike anything that's been in the theaters the past 5 years or so. In fact, you'll probably like it even more than I did. Lucky you. My final score? It gets 2.5 Rorschach ink blocks out of 4.